Hello and welcome to my rather late November TBR and my wrap-up for October. With the US election and the new lockdown restrictions here in the UK, I've been somewhat distracted, so I missed posting my TBR at the beginning of this month. But that doesn't mean I'm not still taking part, I'm not still reading. The last few videos were somewhat polarising and I've gained a few subscribers, so hopefully those people will stick around for a while and we can discuss some books together. I'll cover my wrap-up for October first. I got some decent reading done over October, and having fought off a few migraines and somewhat rebalanced my sleep pattern, I'm now feeling like I'm getting back into a routine. This routine has meant more reading, which is good. I finally finished the last few chapters of The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This was a buddy read way back in August, where I read the lion's share of the book, but I stopped at around the 75 to 80% mark, as I felt I needed a break and I really wanted to read a few other things. After a disastrous September where I spent most of it fighting off migraines and sleeping, I was finally able to come back to this quite late last month. But now that it's finished, I'll be working on collecting my thoughts and writing up a review for it, which should be up in the next few days. It will likely be my first deep dive review, and I hope you'll get something out of it, even if you've not read the book, as I think the themes that we're going to be discussing there are quite universal. While finishing The Way of Kings was a focus for my reading for much of the month of October, I started out the month by reading The Twits by Roald Dahl, though I didn't list it on Goodreads. It was more an exercise in practicing the Japanese language rather than a serious read of a book, as I explained in my last TBR video. I discovered, though, that while I'm quite nostalgic for these older books, these younger targeting Roald Dahl books just don't hold up quite so well for adults. Not all that surprising. They're very basic and the plots are highly contrived. Holding that against a children's book, though, that just seems silly. Hence why I didn't bother to track it or rate it. I'm beginning to wonder, though, if I would still consider some of the more meaty books by the likes of Roald Dahl, such as Matilda or my personal favourite The Witches, as highly as I once did. They do have a more involved storyline and a deeper narrative, but that's something to investigate at a later point, I think. In quite stark contrast to children's books, early in October, I also read The Wild by Kay Webster, a book that I made a point to seek out simply because it was banned on Kindle and unlisted on Amazon, making it genuinely difficult to obtain, and that just drove me crazy. If you tell me I can't have something, I will suddenly want it more, to the point of often seeking out things just because they're banned, like with this book, even when I've previously not shown any interest in it. I knew going in what I was getting, that this was an incest-focused erotica book, and honestly I was expecting something a little more extreme. While the subject matter was purposely taboo, I didn't find myself overtly shocked by it. It wasn't a good book by any stretch. This is still tacky porn after all, but I was expecting it to be considerably worse than it was. It does the same weird thing that a lot of erotica does, as far as I know. I've not read a great deal, but the few that I have read all do the same thing, where they describe the woman's vagina as her sex or her heat. Sentences like, "I felt his fingers against my heat," and "he thrust it deep into my sex." Sorry, but no. Sex and heat are not nouns. This isn't good prose, it's awful, awful sentence construction, and it makes for an embarrassingly uncomfortable read. I don't know anyone who finds describing a vagina as their sex or their heat sexy. I don't know anyone who finds that appealing. That said, I would honestly prefer reading this over, for example, 50 Shades of Grey or even Twilight. It's low-end pap that has little redeeming it, but I think that's just the erotica genre in general. Regardless, curiosity is a bad thing for me, and wasting almost a week by reading this trash effectively pushed all my other reading on my TBR back because sometimes I'm just an idiot who does something because his brain can't not stare at the crash site, rather than actually do what I enjoy. Next, I decided I wanted to read something light, so I read Volume 1 of the Death Note manga, perhaps as a palate cleanser, but also to continue my attempts to improve my Japanese. I intended to continue the series over the next few months, but as I own the series in English, and only the first volume in Japanese, I'll be continuing on in English, which should at least speed up how fast I go through these books, as manga is significantly shorter than the average novel, for obvious reasons. I could probably power through each volume in a day or so without much thought, but I do feel that that would be missing the point. Spending time to focus on and appreciate the art is part of the experience with manga, so I'm going to try not to gloss over that aspect. Getting back to my TBR, as it was one of the buddy reads for this month on Discord, I decided to go back and reread The Devil You Know by Mike Carey, which is a book that I read previously in the year but didn't rate or list on Goodreads, primarily because I felt a little detached from it. It was because of a spell of repeated migraines I was having. I just felt I hadn't really recalled it well. Indeed, I definitely hadn't. I found that I'd completely forgotten huge sections beyond the first half, probably because I was reading in between massive migraines. So, being able to go back and give it some more time was nice. It was almost like reading it for the first time, if I was honest, though it was a far easier read because I was at least slightly familiar with it, even if subconsciously. This was nice, given I was still on the delicate side whilst reading this, and I'm not in a rush to give myself more migraines. As for the book itself, I absolutely love the noir tone and the casual lyrical writing in this book. Some of the descriptions are particularly evocative, and the subtlety of the emotion displayed helps reinforce the atmosphere. It has quickly become one of my favourite books of this year, and I'm genuinely looking forward to continuing on with the series, depending on how I reflect on this in the coming months, or if the later books improve on what's been set up in this book. This series may well push its way onto my top 10 list. Continuing with my TBR, in the last few days I finished off the last few chapters of Praetor Moon, which I've had sitting unfinished for a while now, but I unfortunately didn't get around to starting Shadow of the Scorpion, which was actually the buddy read book that I was supposed to be reading for last month. Given it was a buddy read book though, this is going to be pushed forward for November, as it's one that I do want to get into. I still want to give the Polity series a chance and discuss it with people who've read it. I'm excited to see what comes of it, as it's got some interesting concepts with the way it handles AI and the almost Starship Troopers level combat scenes. It's a nice pulp sci-fi staple. As I've already whet my appetite now with the first book, I suspect the second will be an easy read. I just need to reassess how much time I can realistically devote to reading and stop planning too many simultaneous reads until I can guarantee that I've got these migraines under control, which sadly they're not quite yet, as I did have one in the first week of November, though that may have been because I foolishly sat up watching the US election coverage all night. Still, hopefully that'll be the end of it, and I'll have a relatively easy month. If more migraines hit, I'm going to end up with a lot less free time. Finally, for my October wrap-up, I have Full Moon, the second book in the Dresden Files series, which I'm currently only about a third of the way through. I intend to keep this one going during November. I'm pleased with some of it, but the most recent chapter kind of pissed me off in a way, and I put it down around the third week of October and haven't picked it back up again yet. I do intend to go back to it though. So, that's my wrap up for the month of October. I didn't get to finish my full TBR, but I'm quite pleased with the reading I did get done, and I'm excited to continue into November. Given that I'm struggling with finishing my TBRs as of late though, primarily due to ill health, but the reason isn't that important. I've decided for November to keep it as simple as possible. We've got the buddy read in the Discord, which you're free to join, and I encourage you to do so. It's still ongoing, of course, even if this video is a little late. It's a lot of fun discussing books with others, and while our community is still a little sparse and still quite small, that gives us a very friendly and intimate environment, and it makes the Discord feel very much like a second home. I'm actually quite proud that we have a community, even if it's small, that can discuss hobbies without needing the silly no politics rules that so many other places have. We keep the books channels about books, we have separate rooms for chatting about more heavy issues, rooms for talking about video games, rooms for pretty much everything. Now that we're stuck in lockdown yet again here in the UK, it's pretty much my only window to the outside world, so I do appreciate having it as an option. With that plug for the Discord aside, though, the Buddy Read channel on that Discord is the focus here for what I'm using to choose my books. Now that I'm realising how little I can reasonably read without either making myself ill or just simply not finishing what I'm reading, I'm pretty much reading only what's in that Buddy Read. So, in the Buddy Read, there were 2 books chosen, and I'm genuinely excited for both of them. I will be finishing off Full Moon by Jim Butcher, the second Dresden Files book, as I've said. I suspect I'll be able to finish that in just a few days, and I'm probably going to listen to the audiobook. I've recently picked that up on Kindle, and with the audiobook being read by James Masters, who has a really good voice and enunciates quite well, it's quite easy to follow along, and it means that when my head is feeling delicate and I can feel a migraine coming on, I can lay back and I can listen without straining my eyes with excessive reading, which means that I can hopefully get through more books that way. That's what I'm hoping. I do struggle to concentrate on audiobooks, so I can't do it with anything that's too heavy, but if I can't read, it's at least a way for me to consume some media. Now, onto the official Buddy Reads for November. The first Buddy Read choice was Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey, which is the first book in the Expanse series. That's a hard sci-fi space opera that I've heard consistent great things about, and I'm really excited to give it a read. I'm also going to watch the TV show as well. I'm going to watch the first season this month so I can compare it to the show, as I've heard the show gives a great outline and good visuals. It's really appealing from a sci-fi TV fan point of view, but the book goes into more depth. Both are fantastic, apparently, and the show sticks very close to the book. It's a very faithful adaptation. I've already watched the first 2 episodes of the show, so I'm going to start by watching the rest of those shows over the first half of the month. Then I can close out the month by reading the book after a week or so to let myself mull over the TV show, so I'm not going directly into the same story again. This means I should be able to appreciate the added detail and the subtlety of the book, have a deeper feel for the characters, and hopefully enjoy it all the more because I'll be already attached to these characters and already have an idea of what to expect from them. It'll be like rereading rather than reading the book. I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm hoping that it'll be an interesting way to experience it. It'll be a good little experiment anyway. The second book that was voted for in the Buddy Read is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, which is one I intend to power straight into as soon as possible. In fact, I'm already reading this and I'm a few chapters in already. This has been near the top of my TBR for months, and I'm so glad that I'm finally getting to it. From the cover aesthetic alone and the title, it already has an autumnal feel about it, but having actually started reading it now, it begins with quite a cold and dreary setting that makes me think of the beginning of winter. So it actually feels quite appropriate for November, really. I know the story is a traditional fantasy in which the main character tells their life story and boasts about their exploits. That's all I really know going in. It's well regarded as having incredibly well written prose and is considered by many to be one of the best modern fantasy novels ever, which is really saying something. Given how much I loved The Lightning Tree, which is a short story by Rothfuss that I read earlier this year, I'm expecting to love this book. But we'll see. So far, I'm enjoying what I've read. I was expecting the prose to be a little more purple than they are. They're actually quite easy to read. This book is well regarded enough that the pretentious literary fiction crowd often want to claim it as one of their own, so I think that speaks volume. It could mean that this is a fantastic standout book, or it could mean it's a pretentious pile of old wank. I'm still less than 10% of the way in, so I'll soon find out, I think. So with those two big hitters, both of which I suspect have a chance of making my personal favourites list if they live up to the reputation that they both have, I'm very tempted to just leave it there and not add anything else to the list, just those two books. If I can get through those, that would at least be a success for me, I think, given how bad my TBRs have been, given how much I've struggled to actually find the time and the ability to read. It seems that excessive amounts of reading triggers my migraines. But I'm not going to. As silly as it sounds, I'm going to add at least a couple more. Nothing big, though. As I said earlier, I never did get around to Shadow of the Scorpion, which was supposed to be a buddy read for October. So this is going to be my second book of November after Name of the Wind. It's only 276 pages long, so it should be a relatively light read, and it's one I'm excited to get to. Polity series is huge, and it's one I've been looking forward to for a while now. I have the entire Agent Comac series, that's the next 5 books in the Polity universe, sitting on a shelf waiting for me. Pulp sci-fi is a brilliant subgenre. All the elements of sci-fi crushed down and allowed to simmer in the background, while the focus is on fantasy-style characters and action set-pieces, allowing for a world where you can both get lost in the sci-fi, but where you also get the character-driven escapism at the same time. Done badly, it can be shockingly bad, but done well, it can be one of the most engaging subgenres there is. So I'm really hopeful that this can be a new favourite. I just need to find the time to put into the series, because so far I'm only one book that's basically a novella into the series, and given what it's supposed to be, it's still only a taste. Naturally, I'm going to probably want a palate cleanser between Shadow of the Scorpion and Leviathan Wakes. Going from one sci-fi space opera to another without a change of scenery is probably going to be a little jarring, especially with one of them being a pulp sci-fi and one of them being a hard sci-fi. So a little change of scenery in between will be good. So I'm going to add Volume 2 of Death Note, as a manga is a relatively quick read, so I can probably bash it out in a day or two without much fuss, and it'll give me something a little different to break up that space opera feel. While naturally it has its flaws and its contrivances, I do feel Death Note is one of the better mangas out there, and I'm glad to be revisiting it and delving into it. I've only read a couple of volumes years and years ago, but I did watch the anime. But this was all well over a decade ago, so this is the first time I'll be experiencing the whole manga from start to finish, as an adult, effectively. I'm quite looking forward to seeing what I make of it. That's it then. Just these. I'm not reading anything else this month. Unless I actually get through all of these books, which is unlikely. I'll probably still be reading Leviathan Wakes by the end of the month, I reckon. But that's fine. December's buddy read looks like it's going to be themed around nostalgic books based on what the Discord has been talking about. Mainly children's classics as well. So if that's the case, it's going to be a few easy reads over December. So if I do end up taking Leviathan Wakes into December, then that'll be no big shame. I'll probably have enough time to fit that in around the buddy reads there. Well, wish me some luck. Hopefully I can actually find the time to read and finish the TBR for a change. I'll be back soon. Until then, thanks for watching.